In 323 BCE, possibly the greatest human being to have ever lived would sadly pass away, either from malaria or from being poisoned after a heavy night of drinking. In the years following, Alexander the Great's empire would splinter as his former generals grabbed large chunks of it for themselves. His mother, Olympias, found herself threatened by Cassander, the son of Antipater. Being Molossian, one of the ancient Greek tribes of Epirus, she allied with its king. Now, I'm sorry for how badly I'm about to pronounce his name, but King Aeacades and Olympias then marched on Macedon in order to reconquer the kingdom. However, the reconquest took a turn when Olympias' ruthlessness lost her the support of the Macedonian people. By 317 BCE, Cassander had pushed north and completely invaded Macedon. By the end of the war, he would be victorious and Olympias would be killed. Soon after, a domino effect ensued. A segment of the Epirot army revolted and Neoptolemus II was declared king of Epirus. This then led to the deaths of many of Aeacades' family and close allies. However, amongst the chaos, the deposed king's 3-year-old son would be whisked away to safety in the eastern border of Epirus. Knowing all too well that the young prince was permanently in danger while he still resided in Epirus, those protecting him fled north to Illyria. It was here they found themselves welcomed into the court of King Glaucus, and this was where Prince Pyrrhus of Epirus would be raised. Yes, I interrupt your viewing pleasure once again, and by which I mean, if you want, you can support me on Patreon for like £1 and get regular updates on the stuff I'm working on. And there's other tiers where you can see videos 48 hours earlier and get sneak peeks at them before anyone else. You can also grab my book, which is in script format and based off of Celtic mythology. And if that doesn't take your fancy, you can get my merch, which is an easy way of touching my moustache. And if absolutely none of those options float your boat, the best way to support me is to like, subscribe and share so that my videos can get out there and more people can see my beautiful face. And I can give them nightmares. Anyways, shh! Because Daddy's talking. And it's time to get on with the video. Why Glaucus took Pyrrhus in, we don't truly know. Perhaps it was out of pity, perhaps his Molossian wife felt a duty of care, or perhaps Glaucus just liked having a claimant to the Epirot throne around. Pyrrhus' safety still wasn't guaranteed, however, and soon after, Cassander would invade Illyria and smack Glaucus into next week. Glaucus then essentially bent the knee to Cassander, but kept Pyrrhus in his court. With the Illyrians dealt with, Cassander turned his attention to Demetrius I, son of Antigonus I. Now, whilst Cassander was distracted with the Antigonid threat in the east, Aeacades saw his opportunity and marched into Epirus. Upon his arrival into the kingdom, he immediately began to gather a large army. Philip, Cassander's brother, was then dispatched to deal with the growing problem. Philip then went on to win 2 battles, which ended up in the death of the deposed king. Then, in 307 BCE, Glaucus would successfully invade Epirus. The usurper Neoptolemus was thrown out and a friendly puppet regime led by Pyrrhus was installed. He was just 11 years old. Pyrrhus would then travel back north to Illyria in 313 BCE to attend the wedding of Glaucus' son. Whilst he was away, the Molossians launched a rebellion against him, furious at his dependence on the Illyrians. Neoptolemus, once again, found himself on the throne. Glaucus was unable to help Pyrrhus, and rather than sit around waiting in the Illyrian court, he decided to travel south to the court of his sister's husband, Demetrius I. Pyrrhus would immediately impress Demetrius, and the pair would travel to Anatolia to rendezvous with Demetrius' father. It was here Pyrrhus would study the art of siege warfare and generalship under the Antigonid leaders. Antigonus himself allegedly believed that Pyrrhus would become one of the greatest generals of his time. At the young age of 18, Pyrrhus would get his first taste of a major battle, as Lysimachus brought 80,000 men against Antigonus and Demetrius' 80,000 men. The Battle of Ipsus would commence in 301 BCE, with Pyrrhus most likely fighting in the cavalry as he was a member of the aristocracy. potentially alongside Demetrius on the right flank. Despite his young age, he would fight with the utmost courage during the intense melee, even routing the enemy in front of him. Yet Pyrrhus's courage was not enough to save the day, and the Antigonid dynasty lost all of its holdings in the east. Both Pyrrhus and Demetrius would be forced to escape to Greece. Refusing to go down without a fight, Demetrius would rise to meet Lysimachus once more, leaving Pyrrhus back in Greece to look after the remnants of the Antigonid forces. With the Antigonid position severely weakened, Demetrius was forced to make peace with Ptolemy I, the founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Pyrrhus was then sent to Egypt as a hostage as part of this peace deal, but this was more akin to just being a permanent house guest. Now, Pyrrhus at this point had spent most of his life in foreign courts and quickly got to work impressing the Egyptian court during military exercises and hunting. Eventually, he would gain Ptolemy's favour and marry his stepdaughter, Antigone. Finally, in 297 BCE, Cassander died, and Pyrrhus acted quickly, using his favour with Ptolemy to gain soldiers and money for a campaign to retake his homeland. Neoptolemus would then agree to a deal where they both shared power. This delicate balance didn't last long, and it was quickly revealed that Neoptolemus was plotting against Pyrrhus, who promptly invited him to dinner and had him assassinated. Now Pyrrhus had full control of Epirus, and he wanted to expand its borders.
Chief, mate, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
The main issue, according to Thucydides, was that the Epirot army was a disorganised tribal levy. In other words, they were incredibly brave when they were winning the battle, but as soon as the winds changed direction, they were quick to abandon the battlefield. The Epirot army did, however, begin to take inspiration from Macedonian military reforms, such as the Sarissa phalanx formation. Alexander the Great's companions would actually form the main inspiration for the Epirot cavalry, which fought with lances. Pyrrhus soon had an army of 20 to 25,000 men, which he would make use of during a civil war between Cassander's two sons, Antipater and Alexander. Their mother, Thessaloniki, had split the kingdom between them, favouring the younger son, Alexander. Antipater was not happy with this at all, and in 294 BCE, he killed his mother and claimed the entire kingdom for himself. Alexander would turn to Pyrrhus for aid.
Got knuckles for aid!
Who would accept, in return for the territories of Stymphia, Pyrrhoia, Ambracia, Arcania, and Amphilochia. Pyrrhus quickly secured his new territories and pushed on into Macedonia. In response, Antipater turned to Lysimachus for aid. Lysimachus' response was the two brothers needed to sort it out between themselves. Demetrius then rocked up after a hard campaign against the Spartans, killed Alexander, and claimed the kingdom of Macedon for himself. Demetrius then cleverly played on the legacy of Alexander, claiming that the Antigonid dynasty were the only ones trying to keep it alive. He then boldly claimed that Cassander and his two sons were the murderers of Alexander's family, which was actually true. With all this put together, Demetrius managed to place himself as a hero of the Macedonian people. In a strange turn of events, falling from ruin, Demetrius had managed to unite all of Greece into one vast empire by 294 BCE, the only exclusions being Epirus, Messania, and Sparta.
This is Sparta!
I know what clip I've just played, and I'm sorry. Now that they shared a border, Demetrius and Pyrrhus quickly became rivals. On top of this, Pyrrhus' wife Antigone died in childbirth, which sent him on a series of political marriages that gained him the island of Cochra. Things weren't going swimmingly for Demetrius either, and in 294 BCE, the Greek city-states staged two separate revolts against him. Pyrrhus saw his opportunity and marched into Macedon with 30,000 men, even managing to extract tribute from some of the cities. Demetrius quickly turned north to meet him, and Pyrrhus realised that he couldn't fight off his old ally's far larger army and retreated to avoid a pitched battle. Demetrius then just pivoted back south, leaving 11,000 men under Pentalchus, who was his best general. Meanwhile, the daughter of Agathocles of Syracuse, Lanassa, defected to Demetrius because she could no longer take sharing her home with Pyrrhus's other barbarian wives. Demetrius happily welcomed her with open arms, and she happily welcomed him with Lanassa. Demetrius gained Cochra and Leucas. Pyrrhus did nothing to stop this because he just didn't have the navy to challenge Demetrius. In 289 BCE, Demetrius would now push his advantage and attack Pyrrhus's Aetolian allies. He would then leave Pentalchus to occupy them while he pushed into Epirus itself. He would invade Ambracia through the mountain road while Pyrrhus would raise his own forces and march to meet his old master along the coastal road. In a strange twist of fate, this caused the two armies to march straight past each other, and Demetrius couldn't believe his luck as he marched into Epirus unopposed. Pentalchus saw things a bit differently. You see, Pentalchus and his 10,000 troops stationed to occupy the Aetolian allies saw 20,000 men marching towards them under the command of Pyrrhus. Now, even though Pyrrhus had the advantage, Pentalchus was the more seasoned commander and his troops more experienced. The terrain also favoured Pentalchus, so the battle actually played out fairly evenly. As the battle raged, the two commanders sought each other out, eventually finding each other amongst the chaos. Upon meeting, Pentalchus challenged Pyrrhus to individual combat, which Pyrrhus accepted. First, they threw their spears at one another before charging and bringing their swords together in a mighty clash. Pentalchus got the first blow, wounding Pyrrhus. However, Pyrrhus quickly returned the favour, wounding Pentalchus on the thigh and on his neck. Defeated and bleeding out, Pentalchus was dragged away, while the emboldened Epirot army charged forward and cut his army to pieces. Pyrrhus would manage to capture 5,000 men during this battle, releasing them almost immediately, celebrating his first major victory as a commander. His army then bestowed him with the title of Eagle for his prowess during the battle and his bravery during the duel. Pyrrhus humbly accepted, stating to all of his troops, "Through you I am an eagle, for how should I not be when I have your arms to sustain me?" This then changed his perception with the Macedonian troops, who now saw Pyrrhus as a worthy adversary. This would be useful later on in 289 BCE, when Demetrius fell ill and Pyrrhus decided to once again invade Macedonia.
I'll fucking do it again.
Okay. To begin with, Pyrrhus simply plundered the countryside, meeting almost no resistance until he reached Ægea, where he was forced back. Demetrius quickly recovered and made peace with Pyrrhus so that he could focus on his father's lost lands in Anatolia and the Middle East. The old Antigonid enemies, Ptolemy, Seleucus and Lysimachus, promptly formed an alliance against Demetrius. They also sent embassies and letters to Pyrrhus, letting him know of the best time to attack the Antigonid king. The decision was a difficult one. If he remained neutral, he carried none of the risks, but he could quickly find himself defending against an even more powerful adversary. This could either be by a member of the alliance or a victorious Demetrius turning his armies on Epirus. If he joined the alliance, he could stand to gain Macedon. The alliance lost, Demetrius could turn his armies on Epirus. In the end, Pyrrhus decided to join the alliance. Lysimachus marched into Macedonia from the north, while at the same time Ptolemy launched a naval invasion from the south. Demetrius responded first to Lysimachus and marched northeast to meet him. And at this moment, Pyrrhus attacked unopposed from the west. Pyrrhus would push deep into the kingdom, while Lysimachus would be absolutely thrashed by Demetrius. However, Demetrius' army felt betrayed by their king as he had allowed Pyrrhus to pillage their homes. Turning round as quickly as he could, Demetrius marched to reach Pyrrhus, who began spreading propaganda amongst Demetrius' men. Eventually, the entire army defected and Demetrius was forced to flee. That's what you get for breaking the bro code. Despite his losses, Lysimachus claimed a joint victory with Pyrrhus. The two then shared the kingdom for a time, but Lysimachus pushed Pyrrhus back to Epirus. Demetrius would die shortly after, and his son Antigonid II would inherit the few Greek holdings he had left. And just because it wasn't enough fighting, Lysimachus then decided to attack his old ally, Seleucus I. Seleucus then defeated and killed Lysimachus before promptly being killed himself by Ptolemy Thunderbolt. Ptolemy was then declared king of Macedonia by the Macedonian army, leaving Pyrrhus as the only other claimant to the Macedonian throne. Instead of claiming the throne, Pyrrhus instead turned his attentions to the west. In Magna Graecia, a region of southern Italy colonised by the ancient Greeks, a city known as Tarentum, modern-day Taranto, was once colonised by the Spartans. Recently, the city had provoked a new and rising power by attacking their ships and humiliating their envoys. This new and rising power is known as the Roman Republic. The democratic Tarentines elected to send an envoy to Pyrrhus asking for assistance. Pyrrhus accepted with the conditions that the Tarentines funded the war and he had overall control of the allied armies. The Tarentines quickly accepted these terms. Ptolemy at this point saw an opportunity to avoid a conflict with the Epirot king and gave him 5,000 phalangites to help with the upcoming campaign. At the beginning of 280 BCE, the Tarentine fleet appeared to pick up the 20,000 strong army containing mostly Epirot and Macedonian Sarissa pikemen. Sarissa pikemen weren't the only units inside the army, however, which also contained 3,000 cavalry, 2,000 archers, 500 slingers, and 20 war elephants. In preparation for the arrival of Pyrrhus, the Romans began militarising any cities under their control. Upon arriving in Tarentum, Pyrrhus did much the same, preparing his army and dealing with any political opponents. The Romans gave control of 4 legions to Consul Publius Valerius and ordered him to march directly on Tarentum. This was an attempt to force Pyrrhus into battle early so that he lacked the support of his Greek allies who were yet to arrive. The Romans' main tactic to draw him out was to pillage the countryside as they travelled down south. This worked and Pyrrhus marched to meet them. Once he caught up with them, Pyrrhus discovered 4 Roman legions and 4 allied legions. The front ranks of the Roman army at this time were filled with the young and inexperienced Hastati. Behind them were the slightly more experienced Principes, and behind them in reserve were the veteran Triarii. In total, the Roman force consisted of 40,000 men, with 2,400 Roman and allied cavalry. Pyrrhus's army had now grown to 31,000 men, 1,000 of which were Rhodesian slingers and Thracian javelinmen, which formed his skirmishing force. The Pyrrhic cavalry consisted of around 4,000 horsemen from Thessaly and 20 war elephants. They fought in a diamond formation with a 12-foot long, 2-handed spear called a zaiston. That. I'm well acquainted with 2-handed spears. Pyrrhus still tried to delay the battle for as long as he possibly could, giving his allies as much time as possible to join him. He would shadow the Romans for a short time until they reached the road to Heraclea. Pyrrhus would set up camp on the left bank of the Cyrus River, purposefully blocking the aforementioned road. The Romans then camped upstream on the other side of the river. Alongside his friend Megacles, Pyrrhus decided to scout the enemy camp, fully expecting to see a horde of barbarians. To his shock, he discovered the well-organised Roman war machine camping on the opposite shore. This even prompted him to state, "These don't look like barbarians to me. We'll see what they can do soon." Fearing a surprise attack, Pyrrhus left a contingent of light missile troops to guard the riverbank, then turning his attention to other concerns. Little did he know that in 280 BCE, the Battle of Heraclea would commence. Lavinus surprised Pyrrhus completely by ordering the entire Roman army to cross the river after only a few hours' preparation. The contingent Pyrrhus left behind slowed the Romans for a short time before they found themselves being charged by the Roman cavalry, which had crossed slightly further upstream. Pyrrhus reacted quickly, organising his phalanx and taking 3,000 of his best cavalry and charging down at the Roman light infantry vanguard in order to slow them down. This worked perfectly, slowing the Romans down and providing an inch of breathing room. At this point, the Pyrrhic army attacked full force, but disaster struck. Pyrrhus was knocked from his horse and almost killed by a Roman rider. Megacles, thinking quickly, donned his friend's armour, allowing Pyrrhus to pull back slightly without taking a hit to morale. The phalanx now began doing what it did best and pushed the Romans back to the river. Believing their king was now dead, the Epirot army's morale shattered. Gaps began to appear and their flanks opened up. Sensing the tide was now turning in their favour, the Romans began to push back. Not willing to be beaten so easily, Pyrrhus began charging up and down his lines, yelling to his men that he was not dead. As a last resort, Pyrrhus pulled forth his most lethal weapon. And the Romans went from kicking the shit out of the Pyrrhic army to shitting themselves as 20 war elephants slammed into both their flanks. This terrified the horses of the Roman cavalry, which ended up charging through their own lines. This obliterated the Roman formation, and the legions turned tail and ran. By the end of the battle, the Romans had taken 7,000 casualties, with a further 2,000 men captured. After the battle, Pyrrhus tried to negotiate a peace, but in typical Roman fashion, they flat out ignored him, with both sides preparing for their next encounter. Now, I'm sorry guys, we're going to have to leave it there on that cliffhanger, but there will be a part 2 out at the end of the month. And don't forget, you can get access to that 48 hours early on Patreon. However, if you're really desperate for more info about Pyrrhus before part 2 comes out, there is sources linked down below that I used to make this video. So yeah, until next time, see ya.